Before you say, oh, this is just some guy who hates drug users, I'll start the video by saying that I was a drug user, and I don't mean just a little bit, I mean that's how I lived my life at university for at least 2 years. My room in second year at university was basically just a dark, smoky drug den. That's what it was. Every day I would wake up and I would smoke weed immediately. That was the way I started my day. And then throughout the day, it would just go like that. It would just be a constant consumption of weed. And then there'd be other drugs at other points, but that was kind of like the bread and butter, if you like, was weed. So I understand what it's like to live that kind of life. And I believe that I should have been punished for that. I believe that the law should have actually represented a real deterrence for my actions. I believe that the consumption of drugs should be illegal, that people should be penalised for it and they should be imprisoned for it. And the reason I believe that is because using drugs wasted so much of my time. And it didn't just waste my time, it stole my energy, it stole my ambition. It made me shrink as a person and become less socially confident because I wasn't spending time in the world. I was just spending time, in my university accommodation, smoking with friends and doing nothing useful. It made me less of a person. And there was even a point in my life when I first started to give up drugs, where I thought it felt like it had a permanent effect on my intelligence, that it had actually made me stupider permanently. And I'm not sure if that's gone away yet. Maybe it's started to heal, but these things are dangerous. And lots of people will tell you that weed is, marijuana, cannabis is a safe drug. It's one of the softer drugs. I don't believe that at all. I think that it's one of the most dangerous drugs there is because I've taken it and I know the consequences of it. If you get into the habit of using this thing, it can very quickly destroy your life. And there is a body of evidence building now which shows a very strong connection between mental illness in young people and the use of marijuana. So I wish I'd actually been deterred from using this terrible drug by a police force which actually cared about the people who were using it. And I mean care about it in the sense that they knew that this was a wrong thing to do, that this was an immoral thing to do, and that people who did this to themselves should be punished. And I know one of the arguments that people in the drug lobby and young middle class university students use to justify their legalization campaigns is that the war on drugs has failed, they say. Marijuana has been illegal in this country for a long time now. It doesn't seem to have done anything to affect the usage of marijuana, so let's just make it legal now. This is nonsense, because whether or not marijuana is legal or illegal in law has no bearing on the reality, because what really matters is whether it is de facto criminalised or decriminalised. Do the police actually care about it or not? And one of the things which everyone in a drug circle knows is that the police do not care about the use of marijuana. In fact, they generally don't care about the consumption of drugs per se. We all know this. It was one of the things that we used to laugh about when we first started doing it at university. It's one of the things that we'd very often mention and laugh about, the police don't care anyway. But when the conversation is brought into a debate format, suddenly everyone changes tone and adopts the idea that the police do care about it because it's illegal. But we all know that that's a fantasy. The possession of marijuana has been de facto decriminalised in the United Kingdom since the 70s. And as a result of that, the use of this drug has increased exponentially. And I think this is not just a shame, but young people have been betrayed by this lack of enforcement, by this lack of care from the police. The effect that it's having on young people's mental health. And the other argument that I really don't like is that, oh, if we legalize it, then we can reap the tax benefits of it. To me, that's essentially arguing that we should profit from the destruction of people who use this drug. We should profit from the poor mental health of young people who use this drug. I can't think of a more cynical and evil kind of policy than that, really. The other argument is that legalization would undermine the criminal enterprises. If we legalize it, then the criminals who sell their unregulated products will go away. This is something which I realized was false before I even decided that smoking marijuana was immoral. When I was at the height of my usage, I went to visit a friend in the Netherlands, and we were all smoking there, and I asked, where did you get this stuff from? Did you buy it from one of the local coffee shops, they call them? I was expecting that it was going to be just from one of the shops, because I know you can buy it at these shops in the Netherlands. And to my surprise, he said, no, it's actually just, we bought it from a dealer, a criminal, effectively. And I was very confused by this. And he said, oh yeah, because it's cheaper. They don't have to pay tax. And this, I think back on this moment and it really clicks for me now. When you legalize a formerly illegal product, and of course it's not legal in the Netherlands, it's decriminalized, but they still have to pay income tax. When you legalize this industry, the criminal gangs don't go away, because of course they still have a monopoly on the cheap trade, because they don't pay tax, they avoid tax. So if you want to get, particularly if you want to get very strong stuff and you want to get cheap stuff, the criminal enterprises will always be there for you. And as it was in the Netherlands, my friends there didn't even buy from coffee shops because it's too expensive. They bought from the criminal gangs and it was stronger, they thought it was better anyway. So it does absolutely nothing to remove the criminal gangs. And then the other argument that you hear all the time is that, well, we should just spend more money on going after the criminal gangs and not criminalizing the users. Of course, the problem with this argument is that there will always be another criminal gang. There'll always be another dealer. It's like a hydra. If you cut off the head of one of them, two more emerge. The only way to get rid of them really is to drain the oasis from which they drink. If you prosecute people for the use of drugs, then the demand for drugs is diminished. If people don't want to take drugs because they're actually convinced that they're immoral, and if the people who would take them anyway are deterred from using them because they are very aware of the fact that police will actually prosecute them for using it, then suddenly the criminal gangs have nowhere to go. Who's going to buy the product? No one. So that the illegal trade shrivels up. Now, of course, I'm not a utopian. I don't believe that this problem is ever going to be solved. There will always be people who want to take drugs and who do take drugs, and there'll always be criminal activity in some sense. But if we want to actually improve the situation, I think we need to take the idea very seriously that firstly the use of drugs is wrong, which of course is a huge debate anyway, because the people who want to legalize it on the whole are people who like using the drugs anyway. They're not, a lot of the time, they're not really just these sorts of cynical people who want to get tax benefits from destroying young people's mental health. They are actually users themselves, but they don't really want to admit it. But if we want to actually solve the problem and we admit that drug use is wrong, then we need to take this idea seriously, that we should deter people from using it. I wish that I had been deterred. As someone who has used these drugs and who has wasted so much of his time, I I really wish that I had been deterred by the police force from ever wasting my time and my life on this stuff. And the criminalization of drugs is not some kind of state oppression, it's the exact opposite. The police force used to punish people for ruining their lives in this country, effectively, for taking drugs which ruined their lives, from helping them to avoid destroying themselves. So drug taking can't be compared with, the freedom to take drugs cannot be compared with other freedoms like freedom of speech. It's just not the same thing at all. In fact, your freedom and your ability to live in a country with liberty is diminished by the use of drugs, because you become a passive, stupefied person who is susceptible to state control. This might sound like a conspiracy theory, but if you've read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, you'll know about Soma. What is Soma? Soma is the happy drug. It's the thing that keeps everyone passive and happy, so the state can maintain control over them. And you see this everywhere. It's not just with actual drugs, it's with social media, in particular TikTok. It's with video games, it's with all these external distractions, all of these stimuli which are keeping us on the leash, keeping us distracted and busy with other things. And the state can continue to roll out new laws which keep us more and more in check. I think that it's the responsibility of every person, every citizen, every subject of this country, and of all countries, to be wide awake, to be alert, to not be the kind of person who can easily have the wool pulled over his eyes. It's our responsibility to make sure that we continue to live in free countries, or that we improve the freedom that we have in our countries. And a wise police force knew this. The old police force in Britain used to police by consent. It realised that most of us believed that drug taking was wrong because it made us into this kind of stupid, moronic, self-destructive person who was of no use to himself and no use to anyone else, and that was actually a bad thing for society and a good thing for the powerful state. So punishing drug use kept us awake, it kept us alert. It meant that we could be sober and not slaves to some chemically affected experience of life.